Well, just picking up, where's Dapo? We actually ended up sitting together at lunch, and just a quick comment that she and I both were recruited to be CPOs, and both of us didn't want to take the job. We had to be convinced to do it, but now that we've done it, I think she's done it about a year, I've done it about 2 years now. We never imagined it would be such a challenging and exciting and relevant role and evolving role. So, anyway.
Yeah, I just like to kind of add to that. I mean, I kind of am sitting here and I'm listening to this conversation about licensing, and I hear your arguments, David, and I kind of think, yeah, that makes sense in terms of, making sure that, the profession is safeguarding supply chains and all the rest of it. But then I hear you talk about the fact that we're in a war for talent, right? The millennials are, we've got to attract those people. And I kind of think, licenses, is that the way that's really going to attract the brightest and the best? And maybe there's some middle ground there, but I really feel we need to look at the full set of consequences of a route that sort of drives the potential for us to kind of create sort of more barriers to entry rather than encouraging people who have the right mindset, the right ethical behaviours, and the right leadership capabilities to join procurement.
I can so echo what you're saying. I'm actually an accountant, okay, nothing to do with procurement whatsoever. But I was involved at the very beginning and for many years in the original regulation of the accountancy profession. I was on the first audit registration committee for 6 years, and I helped to go through all the process of what you're describing. And I ended up realising that there's so many mistakes you can make when you do it that I sort of went to the other end of the scale, and I now work with Biz on deregulation because what happens is when you decide, we want some regulations to make people do things right, that's a great idea, but then you find you've got to check up on it and make sure that people are actually complying with those regulations. In order to make sure that they're complying, you need evidence, and to have evidence you need box ticking, pieces of paper, computer screens, whatever it is nowadays. And that encourages a kind of compliance mentality, which doesn't have the big thinking that Tania's talking about and this lovely lady, but just is really small-minded, nitpicking, have you followed the rules stuff, which does not make a profession better off. It actually stifles it. It makes it expensive, uncommercial, and pointless. And actually, so in the accountancy profession, that was in 1989-90 that we started doing that. We finally got to the stage now where I think we're beginning to throw away the bad bits and keep some of the best bits. And I'm on one particular committee that's about better regulation, more effective regulation, and doing things in a very modern, high-level, compliance-minded sort of, outcome-minded way. You've got to jump straight to that, and it's really, really hard to do it. Yeah. So take a lot of care.
Some very good points, some very good, interesting learnings we could take there. I'm thinking there's for the, just someone who's been down the journey. All I would say is that in designing this, it's not meant to be bureaucratic. It's a qualification and a behavioural standard that we've kept. There is a standard there, but we've kept it to maintain it, and the CPD is driven with it as well. So that enables you all to set CPD levels for any of your staff and say, and what's involved in that is a training course or going to an event like this. This would gain CPD points because we know. I take your point exactly that the danger is the bureaucracy of it. That's always the danger, and I think we have to manage that as an institute, and we've already taken that on board from many feedbacks. I do actually counter that. Tania's point, though, I think if this profession has got a license and it's seen as a barrier, then people will aspire to it as well, because they'll say, I want to get that, I want to be part of that, I can't just walk into it now, because there's nothing more demotivating than seeing your boss turn up on the first day, and he's never done procurement in his life, he's coming from accountancy or wherever and says, I'm going to be here a couple of years, and makes a virtue of the fact I don't know about it, and actually boasts about it, and then goes off and makes the biggest mistake you can imagine. So that really used to demotivate me, and I want to know that when someone's coming in who's running the department, at least they have some understanding of what they're doing. And I guess, the final point I'll make is we've gone for self-regulation. We're not asking for regulation. That's a misconception. But it's coming at us, whether we want it. We're self-regulating because we want companies to say that's the right thing to do. We don't want to regulate it. We want to self-regulate it. But it might well regulate.
Helen.
Yeah, I think I wanted to just support what David's saying. I mean, we've come on a long journey in Scottish public procurement to try to move practice from something that's about enthusiastic amateurs to something that's credible, that's reliable, that's delivering value. And I think that there is a difference between perhaps worrying that too much regulation around licence is going to sort of take us back to the technocratic end of procurement. That it's going to be all people ticking boxes about matrices and processes and not about these softer skills. And so I think the challenge is about how you make being somebody that's got SIPs into something that's got that side of things as well as the technical side of things. But there's danger around enthusiastic amateurs. I was one. I'm not anymore. I've got my SIPs now. I've come down that journey. But if we don't do that and we say any old person can do it, I think it's devaluing what we can do. I think the other thing we need to do is draw the distinction between procurement leadership and procurement profession. And, the two are hand in hand, but they are different. And some of the things that Tania's talking about leadership, someone can lead on behalf of procurement and not be a procurement professional. They can be a CEO that gets it. I mean, we've got a fantastic leader in Scottish local government. He's called David Martin. He was the Chief Executive of Renfrewshire Council, who are the best in class. He's now the Chief Executive of Dundee City Council. Now, he's come from economic development planning background, but he's the absolute most fabulous advocate leader on behalf of procurement, but he isn't a procurement professional. So you can have that, but we do have to underpin it by professionals rather than enthusiastic amateurs, I would suggest.
Yeah, I think the profession could make its greatest strides by having non-procurement people as CPOs, because I think Dapo and Sue are great examples of they come into the profession, they've got all the qualifications, they're commercial scientists, what have you, and they love the profession and they become our greatest advocates and they turn traditional procurement problems on their heads. I think it's a big mistake for us to think, we need all CPOs to be procurement leaders. In fact, maybe we need to push for the opposite for a while. As I said at the start, I absolutely think that everyone down the chain, not everyone, mind you, needs to have accreditation. I think there's going to be people, and once again will benefit us, who swing through procurement. We want the graduate program participants to come through procurement, but if they're not going to be a lifelong procurement professional, why would we make them what have you? But we want them to be advocates so that when they're the business unit president and we're coming to call on them, they're like, oh yeah, I remember my time in procurement, that was really cool, or what have you. So I really think we've got to be careful what we wish for, because it could become like a self-fulfilling prophecy, and we won't refresh.
Yeah, I was, on one of my slides, I was showing this awareness training. Actually, I must be wired up still.
You are.
I mean, stereo now.
You are.
So you're absolutely right. And at the senior levels, I was saying, just awareness. Awareness. It doesn't mean a full-blown studied license and all that. It's the minimum. It's protecting the profession because of what's going on and the things we see going on, and perhaps some, you're not aware of some of the horrors of some of the things that are going on, where we're getting blamed for it. And I get really, and so does Liz, gets very irate when we get slammed again in the media because supply or purchasing has let us all down. It's like a criminal offence. It's what the media's like, and they pick on it.
Chris.
Got to just make a couple of points, I guess. You can talk about a professional association or, a profession and have a entrance qualification. You can have an expulsion process. You can have a values system and all of those things. There's no professional qualification for chairman of a board, non-executive director, CEO. There's a higher standard. there's a higher standard expected. There is a professional requirement for an auditor, but not a CFO. So there are some other areas where you get, in our business by way of example, you have to have a designated expert for the statements that you put out about resource and reserves and those types of things. There's a very specific set of standards there that have to be, you have to have an expert, and it's a defined term exactly what that means in that case. So I think you could go down the path of saying you need an absolute sign-off about the ethical procurement chain and those types of things. And you could say, yes, you have to have someone in your organisation who's capable of doing that. Whether that's a lawyer, whether that's a procurement professional, you could have that sort of situation as a put. It doesn't preclude any sort of accreditation program or any other way of looking at it, really. The other thing to think about is that whatever that is, whatever that licence is and what it defines, doesn't restrict what that person can then contribute. And so if I think I've got an accounting qualification, I've got to do CPD, I get it from a variety of sources, but you know, it's something that's continuing.
Yeah.
But if that was withdrawn, then it wouldn't affect what I do, it wouldn't affect what I could do or would be allowed to do in terms of what I want to do.
Mm.
So it's something I choose to continue, it's something I choose to stay associated with, but it's not something that's compulsory for me to be able to do my job. But it's a professional qualification, association, accreditation, and all of those things. But I don't disagree with having the professionalism, the professional sort of accreditation, all of those things. I think that's exactly, if you want to go that path, that's fine. But it shouldn't preclude who can enter the task. It shouldn't preclude who can contribute the value. It may be specific about what the things are that have to be signed off to say an accredited person reviewed this, came to the conclusion that it was kosher, and we move on.
The professionalisation of working life captures a certain spirit, though, in the climate of opinion within Europe. There is a kind of, might be called a commentariat, the number of people whose lives are based upon commentating. It includes auditors, critics, regulators, inspectors, interpreters, editors, curators. This is a lengthening list of people who are not on the field of play creating something, making something, producing something. Our universities are producing brilliant critics, but very few creators. In Europe, we're running out of entrepreneurs. There is, I think, in the millennials, there are some very exciting signs of this starting. But I do sometimes fear that we produce more professors of English literature than novelists. We produce more film critics than filmmakers. The pool of people actually having the guts was a wonderful word used a moment ago. Your word. The guts, the creativity, the sheer courage to try something out, to do something different. And that's my only fear about professionalisation, that more and more of our best people become judges of what others who didn't have that quality of education are left trying out on the field of play. Do you know what I mean? It's the spectator mentality. Our intellectuals, dons at universities are becoming spectators of the real action in the world. And it comes with a particular kind of judgmentalism that isn't very healthy. It's easy to place judgments on others. Which magazine judged vacuum cleaners the other day, and they went through all the things that were wrong with the Dyson vacuum cleaner. Dyson himself has produced billions of wealth for Britain. If they're that keen on how a vacuum cleaner should be made, why don't they go into business, make the damn thing, and bankrupt Dyson? It's so easy to write an article about vacuum cleaners. It's so difficult to produce billions of worth out of it. We've got one more good question, yeah.
I was just going to speak up for the enthusiastic amateur, actually.
Yes,
which is the
yeah.
fact, I wonder what proportion of the national spend actually goes through CPOs. Because there's an awful lot of SMEs in this country who actually don't depend on professionals. They actually use people, even in the public sector. I know schools where it's the secretary who does the ordering. You know, and you can professionalise so much, but I think one of the things, the big idea, if you like, Procurious, provide the support for those sorts of people who need advice, knew where to turn to, get feedback, and that's a large proportion of the spend, actually, going through the system in the nation. So I'm not against professionalisation, but remember, there are a lot of people in small organisations that need help too. They can't afford that expertise coming in for them.